everyone. Sean Eftink, Director of Managed Security Services Strategy here at ePlus. And today I have the absolute pleasure of chatting with Jefferson Berry and Matt James, two brilliant members of our solutions architect team here at ePlus. Jefferson, Matt, truly appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to chat with us today.
Oh, thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. So we were chatting, the three of us were chatting last week. And full disclosure, I'm not going to try to control this thing. Like it might go off the rails, no promises, but we're going to pop the top and just see where this thing goes. But let me set the table for some context on what we were discussing. So we know that defense isn't enough. We have to assume breach. It's no longer about securing people behind a firewall. Identity is the new perimeter. We're dealing with remote workforces, and the attack surface, it just keeps expanding. So having a security operations center or a SOC capability is table stakes, and having one that's continuously maturing is table stakes. But there's considerations around security operations and whether it should be in-house or outsourced. So here we go. I'm going to pop the top. So where does one begin on the journey for build or buy considerations, and what types of things should they take into account? Jefferson, why don't you kick us off, man?
Sure. So first, I think we have to think too about what is it that's kind of sparking the initiative to, add some people, add some security. Hopefully, it's not following the typical pattern of having an adverse event, and then all of a sudden there's budget and interest in security. I think some of the things we're seeing right now are people's businesses are growing. They're having to absorb a lot of new technologies. They're adding a lot of cloud technologies. They're already busy with what they have, and they're kind of needing some help to get them propelled forward and keep their team on track. Maybe people are hitting a level of maturity where now they're going to want to start to build their own SOC, and they're realizing, hey, the one or two people we had doing security things is just not enough. And I'm really happy that we're having a lot more visibility right now, and technology is able to deliver us a lot more telemetry, so we're able to look at a lot more things and ingest a lot more things. But that also spurs a need for more resources, and it increases the workload, right? So I think those are a few of the things that we're seeing right now.
What about you, Matt? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. There's, with some of the more visible exploits that have been, going on, and you see in the media, especially with like SolarWinds and these different APTs and hacking groups. I think organizations are now being forced to consider more thoughtfully how they'll approach implementing some type of security operations center, right? So I also believe in Europe, there are some laws on the books now that I believe are going to, at the very least, incentivize, but if not mandate, that organizations have these capabilities in-house.
Sure. And the Europe and the United States, California as well.
Oh, right. Yeah, exactly.
Big push there too.
Yeah.
So definitely security, coming closer to mind. I think too, one thing to highlight as well is just staffing in general. And I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but people are worried about the low workload and maybe burning folks out, and that's another factor kind of that we're seeing as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that about burning people out. I was just reading a report not that long ago. I think it was a Trellix report, and it was talking about how we all know about the whole 3 million unfilled roles, right? Like that's been beat into our brains. It's kind of like everybody knows that. But that report was talking about how 30% of the current cybersecurity workforce is looking at changing jobs. Like they're getting burned out. They're not seeing clear career paths, and they're not they're looking at it saying, hey, I get beat up, I get beat up every time something happens, but you're not appreciating the fact of what I'm keeping out every single day and the challenges that we're dealing with
Yeah.
every single day. And so, yeah, absolutely, there is this burnout
It's
piece of that.
it's if I can use a metaphor, a lot of people don't realize how good a football team's defense is when they're getting scored on, right? You can kind of look at it afterwards, but everyone always remembers when that touchdown gets scored, uh, and points start to rack up, right? So uh, your point about burnout is extremely spot on. I think a lot of people watching or listening right now need to understand that even in small organizations, if you set up your own internal SOC, you're looking at probably at a minimum 6 to 8 people, right? Because it can't just be one individual or even two or three individuals, or not to date myself or anyone on this talk, but back in the day, it used to be your network engineers had an additional duty, but the way the world works today, you need dedicated people who work in shifts 24/7, 365, and that, in addition to uh, how difficult it is to stop every attack, it just leads to a lot of burnout because you can't help but feel like you have failed in some way if someone was able to gain a foothold into your infrastructure or network. And then, even if no damage is caused, that's the other thing. If no damage is caused, just the fact that you were breached, and if you are required to report that breach, can have a lot of negative effects on not just morale of your team, but your actual company as well.
Sure. And you don't want to, you get that kind of feeling where you don't want to let anything go because the one thing that you don't look at is going to be the thing that was a problem, right?
Right.
In a few months, people are going to be like, why did you close this out? Why didn't you pursue this further?
Right.
What happened there? I think another challenge too is that you have a group of people with different skill sets, which are needed, and then I already know something, so maybe I don't want to just be doing that every single second of every day. But if I'm the one person who knows how to write the queries for Splunk, or I'm the person who knows how to, upkeep the SIM or some other thing, I might get pigeonholed into kind of doing something
Right.
that I'm not seeing as rewarding anymore, as well. And you're going to have some senior members, hopefully, who are trying to mentor, junior junior folks as well. And so you need to, there's just a lot of uh, development concerns for different people to help keep them interested and engaged, and also help continuously rising that knowledge level for everyone there. Which is why, a couple of things that we see are people needing to offload some of the simple work, some of the L1 work, where maybe I'm going to have someone do some initial triage. And I'm going to have them vet the alerts, so I know that my team is already looking at something um, that's important, right? So that could be an alternative way to look at that. Another approach too would be to, on some of the higher level functions or really specific things, the tuning, just the constant tuning that goes on, or the constant writing of playbooks that's coming
Yeah.
up. We might have someone else who's an expert in that, giving us a hand, where we can offload that, and my folks can work on forensics and IR and developing that, so a couple of different approaches there. I think it's hard to, one really important thing I think to think is each organization is different, and it's really important to consider the needs of the team and the organization that they're supporting, individually, to kind of determine some success for them, and see how you can make a successful outcome.
That's really great. So let me ask you a question, because you kind of triggered something in my head as you were going through that. Um, we also are continuing to see, security budgets increasing. So we know we need that it's going to take more than what we've done in the past. I think a lot of us also come from this pattern of, I acquire tools and then I, put people to respond to alerts that are coming out of those tools, and it's very reactionary and things along those lines. And so there's kind of a couple things that I'm hearing as we're going through this. One is I'm hearing that it almost sounds like we're not going to be able to buy our way out of this challenge. We're not going to be able to technology our way out of this issue. So we can't just, it's not about just going out and spending that budget on the latest security widget and putting in another layer of something somewhere. Like we have to actually introduce more people and processes along with that technology, right? The PPT. And that whenever you're talking about the people aspects of it, it's also not just the security analysts that are doing the investigations into the potential incidents that are coming up. It's also people that are maintaining the tool sets, that are writing the playbooks, that are automating wherever we can automate, because again, we're not going to hire our way out of this problem either, right? We've got to leverage automation. So what's thoughts on that? Am I mishearing, or is that kind of what we were driving at too?
Yeah, so it kind of comes down to the age-old people, processes, and technologies, right? So we
Right.
have to be able to leverage the strengths of each in order to capture the appropriate amount of data. Now, this isn't a good time, a good inflection point to talk about the fact that you're not going to necessarily catch all of the things all of the time, right? So
Impossible.
it's impossible. So what a SOC is going to do is it's going to provide you a lot of visibility into your environment. In fact, and we can talk about this later, it's kind of enhanced, you know, uh, uh, comic book superhero vision when you start talking about user behavior analytics, things like that that are going into these kind of next generation SOC capabilities. So one benefit. About some of these managed service providers that provide those type of capabilities, that allows your technology teams to now worry about what I call the lowest hanging fruit. So most of my background has in my career has been spent in security assurance, so penetration testing, red team engagements and things. And while it sounds really awesome and cool, and it is, most of the time, and I won't throw out a fake statistic, but I want to say more times than not, we achieved our objective of gaining access because of a misconfiguration or something that wasn't installed correctly or things like that. So if you have a limited budget or limited technical resource, you could have them focus on that low hanging fruit and have one of these managed service providers add that kind of jet fuel from a detection and response capability.
I,
That's interesting. Go ahead, Jefferson.
I think another part of that too, Matt, is you can be a little more selective and not as reactive.
Right.
One thing I notice is that people get something new and they just go, this is your manager's going to come in and go, team, this is going to suck for a couple of weeks or a couple of months or a couple of years, because basically we're just going to turn every alert on and sort through them as we go. So,
Yeah.
welcome to Monday. And and
We've all been
you
party
know,
to that debacle.
yeah, yeah, and so
Never goes well.
so if you can focus a little more, and I think talking about tools as well, it's really cool to have the newest laser guided widget, but you have to be able to deploy that, make it work with everything else. So having a little bit of extra bandwidth and having extra support to manage particular functions so that you can actively pursue new technology. Matt, you mentioned analytics. Okay, well, what are these alerts going to mean? What does
Right.
this look like? What do we do after we get them? What are the ones that are important? How do we go through that? The team needs to be able to take those in and make those priorities, and ideally as that's being deployed or before it's deployed, so that there can be some kind of sense of purposefulness. And just having a new tool in itself is nice and wonderful and everything, but might not be able to reach as much success without some planning and help. So I definitely think um, the ability to increase your bandwidth and also the ability to focus on what's important to you at this time. and keeping that present in mind. The changes and the technologies are just shifting all of the time for
Mhm.
everyone, and so that focus kind of things need to be refocused to what's important and what's on point and what your mission is and what's a false positive and what we're ingesting and what our goals are. You know, uh, uh, those are just a few other kind of considerations
There's
there.
there's also some business considerations as well in how you ingest and store the different sources of truth, the logs that are coming from throughout your environment. So y- we talked about a little bit where, let's just ingest everything. Well, these days, with the amount of sensors and alerts and logs consumptions that we're talking about, capacity, even in cloud environments, it gets expensive real quick, and it doesn't take long, depending on the size and scope of your environment, to find yourself spending a lot of additional money just storing logs that you might not have even figured out how to sort through yet. So yeah, having having a business consideration for how you're going to deploy a solution like this, right? Whether it's in-house or through a third party, as well as uh, like you brought up, Jefferson, the knowledge, skills, and abilities of the actual security practitioners, because the really good ones will know how to quickly sort through that information, create automation to get rid and offload the data that's not needed, while working in conjunction with business units who will be able to tell them, hey, you need to hold on to this type of information for legal reasons, right? There's so many different considerations that go into that, and a lot of it comes back to cost to the business.
I think
Right.
it.
Go ahead.
I think yeah. That it really comes back to that, as well as like what's your core competency. If we're talking about, do I want to try to build a SOC, or do I want to
Exactly.
have a support? Do I want to have some kind of hybrid model? How is that going to look? And I think that there's a lot of really legitimate reasons to kind of pick any of those kind of three basic paths. Doing it yourself, having it outsourced, having a combination of both. I think the core competency of the company, where the company's at in the company's journey. Is this a company that's going to be around and uh, growing and planning to be around for the next 20 or 30 years? I mean, you have a very different outlook than we just built this new widget that's going to be fantastic for everyone, and we're hoping to be acquired by, X company, within in a year or two or so, as soon as we can develop it a little bit further. I think some of those are really important to consider. And another factor, which I guess is the elephant in every room, is just money. Right?
Yeah.
Like, is there a commitment? And let's not be buying another $1 million ML AI widget. How what's what's the commitment? What does that look like over the next few years? What's it
Yeah.
really going to take to get us there? And do I, as a director or a CTO, what do I where do I want my people to be? What do I want to spend my time doing every day? Is it making this organization? Is am I the security focused person myself, or is that something, am I involved in another part of the business where we need to focus on that? And that's really where our core competency and interest and value is going to come from. Um, really big choices. And I think it's fair for people to kind of look at some of those things and do what they're doing based on what the financial goals are, as well as just what is the focus of the company, what's the focus of the security organization. Where are you with that, and how do you want to kind of move that forward? And I think thinking about those things is really important to having rewarding success with what you're doing.
It's interesting that you say that. We kind of started off talking about how, and I'm feeling the conversation move this direction. So we're just gonna start heading that way. We were talking at the beginning about how a SOC is table stakes and how continuous maturation is table stakes. And it's interesting as you're going through talking about this and you're mentioning how it really comes down to the business and how are we going to utilize our finite resources to build business value within our organizations, through making sure that they're secure and accessible and that sort of stuff. And so there's a part of me that wonders, is there a portion of this that isn't unique to organizations that it really probably could be, and the word outsourcing kind of keeps coming up, it really could potentially be outsourced, and maybe that is a better approach for some of us. And so I'm curious, when the topic of outsourcing comes up, either because you bring it up or the client brings it up or something along those lines, what guidance do you give them as it relates to outsourcing, pros, cons, that sort of stuff? Matt, maybe you want to kick us off this time.
Yeah, so there's all the considerations that we've already talked about, but one thing that I think organizations need to understand is when you go with like an MSSP to have your SOC outsourced, generally speaking, and I'm highlighting that word because I don't want to say it's always this case, but the MSSPs can really pick up most of the heavy burden of your SOC duties. However, a consideration you have to have is they a lot of times apply a standardized process that can fit many different companies, right? So again, we go back to that low-hanging fruit I talked about earlier. They're going to be really good at alleviating any of your pain and anxiety from that portion, but you still have to have a consideration about unique circumstances for your data. And yeah, so just be conscious of that. They're extremely potent. There's new capabilities coming out every day. It seems like I'm having a hard time keeping up with all of the new, really great things these SOC as a service organizations are providing. But just know that when you go to speak or look at these services, try to get a good idea about. You should approach it with your own risk models in place, your own threat models, and ask how they can help solve for some of your unique circumstances. But out of the gate, plug and play, so to speak, API connections into your environment. They're going. I mean, it's you're going to see immediate gains, right?
Yeah, I think too. I might look at it in a different way and not plain word salad. I promise. Maybe instead of outsourcing, we could think of insourcing extra talent. I think that that's really what we're
Yeah.
trying to do. We're not trying to, I think for real success, this isn't security isn't effortless. Security comes through diligence and struggle and trying different things. And
Right.
so I think maybe insourcing extra talent where you need it, insourcing extra resources where you need them, because this is your environment. It's just the most important assets for your company are things that we're talking about in intellectual property. So these are not things that we can just hand off to someone else and they can take care of. And at the end of the day, uh, your name is what's out in front. Your
Right.
organization, your enterprise's name is what's out in front, and your reputation is there. And if something happens, it's still your reputation and your name and your employees and your products, your customers. So I just want to say it's not an effortless process, but I think looking at it as something where we're having this addition of team members, and I've had some really positive experiences working in the SOC myself, where we had part of our L1 organization was done through a partner, and also too part of our tuning was done as well. So we had in quotes lower level functions, and also in quotes like tier 3 higher level functions as well at the same time. And there was a weekly cadence, and their analysts were just as much a part of our team as our analysts were, and it really needed to be back and forth and regular discussions and just a lot of diligence working on the relationship to make sure that we were able to leverage them in the appropriate way and have that solidity that someone else is helping us with our goals just the way we would ourselves.
That's great. And I love that. In fact, you triggered one of my favorite statements when it comes to outsourcing is you can outsource responsibility, but you can't outsource accountability, right?
Exactly.
You're going to, whether it's a regulator holding you accountable or your senior leadership holding you accountable or your clients holding you accountable, if something goes wrong, nobody's going to care that you were outsourcing it to some other organization. Because again, you can outsource that responsibility, but the accountability is still going to be on you. It's interesting. I would probably add to this. Both of you were talking about the people aspects of this, and that's a big part of the outsourcing. And I would say another consideration when you think about when you kind of peel back the layers and you think about the 3 million unfilled, the 30% potential shrinkage in the current environment and that sort of stuff, the need to leverage automation and those things. I would say those are conversations that probably also need to be part of that vendor due diligence process with those providers. Is hey, how are you building this stuff in house? How are you building talent in house? Are you just going out there and competing for senior resources along with every other organization out there,
Yeah.
or do you have internal processes to build those skill sets in house? Do you have those internal processes to leverage SOAR and XDR and other means of RPA, different ways of automating workflows and responses and that sort of stuff to where you can help me decrease my dependency on personnel? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a differentiator between
Yeah.
different providers for sure. And I think it's important to call that out and see what type of technologies do they support? How does that work? What is the average attention for an analyst? I mean, you're kind of putting someone in a dumpster fire and cooking them slow roasted
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
fried is kind of one thing or another, but it's still happening. And just how is the growth for them on their side? How does that work for them? There's some being an analyst is awesome training for incident response
Right.
and learning so much, just learning massive amounts, and also too having exposure to industries where an MSSP might have different groups that are segmented towards across different industries. So you might be able to see your vantage point is going to be quite different and could be extremely valuable to you as well. And all people need to be um, all people need to be maturing and receiving value from what they're doing and learning. That's the with security. The name of the game is how much you can learn and how fast you can learn it, and how you can take that information and put it together. I think
Sean, you
very very good consideration.
you bring up a very interesting kind of broader security industry concern with homegrown talent, right? So uh everybody, and don't hate the player, hate the game. Everyone's looking to get as much of a good salary so they can take care of themselves and their family, things like that. But what often happens is a lot of these position descriptions and roles come out, and it's like, wow, why does every role require a master's degree and 10 plus years of experience, right? So uh you know it's definitely interesting. And I mean, it could probably be a whole other, talk that we should probably have, but being able to leverage, whether you have a SOC in-house or through SOC as a service or a managed service provider, um, being cognizant of the fact that you need to have your security personnel enthusiastic and engaged in the process, and identify those resources that want to learn, because it's going to help you in the long run. It does not, the ramp up, I feel, is not as long as it probably used to be back in the day, where everyone needed their MCSE before they would let you get onto a network, right? So
Right.
now you say MCSE and people are like, I don't even know what that is. And I'm like, oh, back in the day, that's how we made all the money, right? So I'm probably
Right, that is, yeah.
I'm aging all of us
MCSA.
on
We're
this call.
definitely
I
we're definitely
apologize.
aging ourselves here. We
but
appreciate that, man.
but the ramp up to have competent security professionals that you can put them in the game as quick as possible. Again, another football analogy. Back in the day, you used to sit your first round draft pick quarterback for like 3 to 5 years before they ever came in the game. Nowadays, it's like, no, we draft you, you're going in. So that's because of how the training pipeline has changed over the years. And it's the same with security. I hate to admit this, but there's some young professionals coming out of college with a whole bunch of really great experience because, you know, they're or even out of the military if they didn't come from a college, and they're like they've already got all of this knowledge and experience. It's like, oh, it forces me, a seasoned professional, to have to stick with that. So as it relates to security operations in general, not just a SOC, but just security operations, being able to develop that talent needs to be a strong consideration no matter which way you go, because you either have a connector inside of your company that needs to interpret the data that these MSSPs are providing, or you need to have your analysts and the managers of your analysts be able to execute to help protect your organization.
Excellent. And I
I
agree.
think
We could have a whole nother discussion just on the whole like HR and continuing education and
Oh
like all
yeah.
the things that need to be in that realm of just the people part of that people process and technology. But I'm hoping to bring up one more topic, and it kind of came up early on, and I wanted to make sure we brought it back up here. I want to get you gentlemen's thoughts on this. Hybrid. So does it have to be a binary choice? Does it have to be build or buy? Let me throw maybe an example. You know, it could it be both? Could it be, maybe I have my own SIM platform for log aggregation and retention to meet regulatory compliance challenges. And then I work with ePlus advisory services to assess my current capabilities, establish an incident response plan internally, implement a virtual CISO service to help me continuously mature my security program, because again, it has to constantly mature. But I outsource, or like Jefferson said, insource that threat detection and response, the threat hunting, the SOAR and XDR, continuous improvements around response and workflow automation and that sort of stuff to a provider. Might something like that make sense? Jefferson, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. I think that's really kind of what makes most sense for a lot of people, because different people are going to have different needs. The needs of business are going to fluctuate, and you might need an expert in something that you're not an expert in. You're taking on new technology, or maybe you're having tooling that would be better off managed by someone else. And so you're looking for that expert who can help you with that, and your team can be focused somewhere else. Or maybe there's just the volume of what you're dealing with is just too much, and you need to offset a lot of L1 type functions, so you can step back and have some bandwidth, and your own team can do the threat hunting. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it can really vary from customer to customer, and I think the hybrid approach is probably one thing that's really successful in the way it also creates a lot of engagement. So it can be something that's continually being adjusted to create the correct type of output for the best benefit. Uh, whereas a model where someone else is just completely managing it, you might not have that total visibility into to what you're doing. But I think another thing that you touched on too is that you can have experts in particular things that can help guide you, and you can leverage them for training and developing different aspects of your team or different aspects of your program. And that's just awesome. I mean, that's a really great resource to have, and it's on demand and specialized for you. So
Yeah,
I see a
it's
good benefit.
if you take the 2D and kind of go to 3D, right? It also affects how your organization has its technology deployed. And what I mean by that is you could have a hybrid model whereby your managed SOC is looking at items on your edge, maybe your desktop environments, but you have a very highly specialized threat hunting team that is in the nuggety goodness of like your product security teams or certain data centers or things like that, right? So you're seeing this this meld of concepts, but then it also shifts depending on the specific type of environment, right? Now, some organizations want to be paranoid about not allowing third parties specifically in certain areas, and I totally get that, especially with supply chain security being, topic du jour these days. But also there are just some environments like in the federal space, the military space that they need to keep certain things from having any type of external dependency. So it shifts depending on how you look at the prism, right? So I feel that many organizations derive a lot of value from a hybrid model. Again, it depends on your size. If you're a small SMB, right, it might just make sense. Hey, we just need someone to help us because we don't have anyone. And then you start going across that spectrum and it changes. And now we are shifting that spectrum based upon your technologies.
So I think Matt gets the award today for the use of most metaphors between prisms and football and nuggety goodness and 2D and 3D
You
and
did get
superheroes. Like, you
2D,
covered a very
3D.
broad spectrum, and I
What
really
I'm hearing,
appreciate
what I'm
that.
hearing from you, Sean, is as I was throwing strikes the whole time.
Man, you were killing it. You were absolutely killing it. So here's the fun part. So we could certainly go on about this for a while, and truth be told, probably will. Just be perfectly candid. I think we've extracted a half a dozen more topics to discuss. But gentlemen, we've reached that point. Um, I can't tell you both enough how much we appreciate you taking time to discuss this with us today. Truly, truly invaluable. So as you can see, there's a lot to consider and many approaches to address the challenge. I think what we can all agree on though is there is no one answer. I think it was Jefferson said that actually very early on. There's no one answer. It really comes down to your organization's unique capabilities and needs. And here's the thing, don't feel like you have to go it alone. Contact your account executive and let them know you'd like to consider both building and outsourcing your security operations and that you'd really like to get ePlus's advice on that. As always, we appreciate your time and thank you for spending some of it with us. Have a great day.